Today on the Paul Harrell program, right before we went on the air, the news just broke that John Bolton has been indicted by a grand jury. So we're going to definitely talk about that. Remember when John Bolton talked about how Donald Trump was in serious trouble for his classified documents scam? Well, he's been indicted for the same thing. Only this time I think there's actual proof, and there's not, these staged FBI photographs where they put the cover sheets over, to release to CNN and the press. Also, huge news that the J6 committee basically did an illegal, unwarranted dragnet against 30 million phone records, 30 million Americans, or 30 million phone records at least, targeting those who, attended any of the J6 protests, which, of course, the left still thinks is worse than September the 11th. We're going to talk about that and much, much more today. The Paul Harrell program starts right now.
The Paul Harrell program.
All right, folks, welcome to the show. I really appreciate it. As always, we can't do the show without you watching every single day. I'm flying solo today. My usual co-host, Rob Spencer, not able to make the program today because life happens, and that's what happens sometimes. But on this momentous occasion where we have the news that, that this country, the government of this country is glancing in the right direction of justice by not only the last 3 weeks. We have the indictment of James Comey. We now have the indictment of John Bolton. Still a long list of people, but it's got to start somewhere, right? So let's call a win here. John Bolton, the mustached neocon, never met a war he didn't want to fight, never wanted to start a war. A guy who openly bragged about planning coup d'etats in other countries. Not here, though. Never here. He would never, ever plan a coup here. Nothing like the apparent color revolution that we've all witnessed over the last 10, 11 years. He would never be a part of that at all. But yeah, this is a long time coming. I mean, this is Mr. Weapons of Mass Destruction himself, isn't it? Right? Isn't that who this is? This is John Bolton. This is a guy that represents the foreign policy blunders of my entire lifetime, basically my entire life, right? I'm 41 years old, and the way John Bolton thinks is the way most people in Washington have thought, and they've all gotten their way essentially my entire lifetime. So this is a big deal. This is a guy who used to be hated by the left. It'll be interesting to see what the left says. Will the left come to the defense of John Bolton? Will the left come to the defense of John Bolton? Even though you can go back and you can, go back to when the left was actually anti-war, and you can go back and find where they hated his guts when he worked for George W. Bush. Now, as far as CNN goes, weirdly enough, CNN's initial reporting on this, they had a report this morning indicating that an indictment of John Bolton was imminent or was coming. The report they filed just a second ago, and I have it pulled up, let's go ahead and get to it, is they're actually, from what I can tell just on this initial clip, seems like they think this indictment, or they're reporting that this indictment is legitimate. Listen.
Or Caitlin Polans, who has been reporting on the possible indictment of John Bolton, the former national security advisor for President Trump in his first term. Caitlin, what do we know?
Casey, John Bolton, the former national security advisor to Donald Trump, a longtime federal government official, has been indicted by a grand jury. We are learning that through two different sources from our producer, Hannah Rabinowitz at the Justice Department. And we have confirmed that the grand jury was in today with the lead prosecutor on that case, the same prosecutor who had been on some of the documents of the search of Bolton's house just 2 months ago, or not even 2 months ago, a prosecutor who also has some experience in investigating these sorts of things. He was a prosecutor that was also working on the Biden classified documents handling investigation that led to no charges. But in this situation, the bulk of this case, it's been going on for several years, and our understanding is that it's about John Bolton's use of an email account with AOL, an email account where he was writing diary-like notes and summaries of his time as national security advisor to himself, at times even sending them to his wife and daughter. And that is the sort of thing that the Justice Department does say frequently, not just in the climate of a Trump administration, that that's something that you should not do. We have seen many charges like this before of other high-ranking officials, and that also with John Bolton in those search warrants, and what we're very likely to see in court going forward is that the Justice Department saying he should have known better.
AOL, it's so interesting. What a boomer thing to do, by the way. What a boomer thing to do, still using America Online. That's the first anomaly here. Secondly, I mean, I'm pretty sure I recently saw headlines, and this just came to me, so I didn't pull this, but didn't AOL recently end its services, like in the last couple of weeks? What a coincidence, if that's the case. The man is writing notes to himself. A couple of things come to mind when we think about this. The first thing that comes to mind is not 3 weeks ago, we had in chair number 3, right here to my left, we had Congressman Rick Crawford, my congressman here in Arkansas, and he was sitting in that third chair. He is the chairman of the Permanent Select House Committee on Intelligence. Okay, HPSI. So House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And we were asking him, Rob and I were asking him about, just everything, Tulsi Gabbard, everything else. But one of the things he talked about was what it's like being, the head of the Oversight Committee in the House over the intelligence agencies, right? As I call them, the intel oligarchy, that have essentially, I think, are responsible for a lot of terrible criminal deeds, especially in the last 10 years. But he was telling us the process of going into, secure locations, getting the briefings, then having to flip that switch off. Okay, now I've got to go do other things. I've got to serve on the Agriculture Committee. I've got to do this, that, and the other. But maybe he has an idea. Maybe he has a thought while he's back home in his district about what he heard and something he needs to follow up on. He has to keep all that in between his ears. He can't even write a note about it to remind himself, hey, when I'm back in the SCIF, when I'm back in the secure location where I can talk to my friends on the committee that also have the security clearance, he can't even doodle a little note to himself to remind him to say something when he's back in session, because that would be classified. That would be disseminating classified information on even a little Post-it note. Much less can you log on to a computer with an internet connection and write yourself notes on your own America Online account. Number one, and by the way, people have talked about this before, that this is a way to securely, if you give everybody access to an email account, they all have access to the same email account, you never actually send the emails, but you just write drafts, and everybody has the access to this particular account. You can definitely do a lot of plotting. You can definitely do a lot of sharing classified documents. You all log into the same email address, and then you click on drafts. These are unsent emails, unsent notes. That's very possible what was going on here. Who else had access to John Bolton's America Online account? The idea would be we can bypass the NSA, or we can bypass these other agencies if we don't hit the send button. But I got news for you. That's kind of ridiculous. If you know anything about Edward Snowden's revelations, back in 2012, he detailed a program called X-Keyscore that where the government can monitor the strokes, the backspaces, the deletes, everything, and captures all that and stores it anyway. The bottom line is the idea that you would get on a computer at all, especially one connected to the internet, and start typing yourself notes and reminders and classified information. And, in this day and age when everything is hackable, when the government is recording everything, and not just our government, you have to also, wonder about foreign governments. You have to wonder, even the ones in Five Eyes that I don't trust, right? Because our intel oligarchs will use the Five Eyes, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, to violate our Fourth Amendment. They can't do it, but Britain can do it against us and then report back covertly, maybe in a America Online email chat that everybody has the password to. It's it's a really tangled web. So that's the first thing. Like, how ridiculous if this is the case. Yes, John Bolton should have known better, but what a boomer thing to do. The second thing is this guy's getting older. I'm reminded of that movie. What's the movie called? The Death of Stalin. Did you guys see The Death of Stalin? Steve Buscemi. And it's kind of a dark comedy, what happened when Stalin died. Well, there's this scene in there where I think Steve Buscemi was, he played Khrushchev, right? A younger Khrushchev. And so Khrushchev has this meticulous routine where after he goes to a meeting, with the Communist Party where, they're very trigger happy, who knows who's going to say something they're not supposed to and get whacked. He goes home and immediately sits down with his wife, and his wife starts to write down everything that was said, who said what, who didn't say this, so that they can remember what everything was said. What did he say? Because they were so paranoid that, this meeting or that meeting or something he said could be used against him. And it was just a very scary, life-threatening environment. I don't know. It just comes to mind with John Bolton. Maybe he knows his mind is going and he's trying to remember stuff. That could also be a possibility. I'm not really sure. That's the lesser of the 2 points. The first one is ridiculous. I mean, America Online, really? So anyway, CNN seems to think, hey, they've got him here. They've got him dead to rights. Let's go to the memes. We've got this meme, which is hilarious. Right now, this is John Bolton. A mustache on a Ford Bronco, for those of you listening to the audio-only version, which, by the way, you can get on Spotify or Apple. But I think the video version of the show is now available on Spotify as well. But Apple's is audio-only. Here is, let's see, this is John Bolton is expected to surrender himself to authorities as soon as tomorrow. So we have that clip, and then just a few others. I've just pulled some of these things. Everybody, something happens, and everybody, breaking, John Bolton indicted. John Bolton indicted. So I was kind of scrambling, 10 minutes before we came on the air, just trying to find relevant stories. Here's one. So here's Donald Trump's reaction. He was asked in the Oval Office, hey, John Bolton just got indicted. What do you think about that, President Trump? Listen.
Just indicted by a grand jury in Maryland. Do you have a reaction to that?
I didn't know that. You told me for the first time, but I think he's, a bad person. I think he's a bad guy. Yeah, he's a bad guy. It's too bad, but that's the way it goes.
Have you reviewed the case against him?
That's the way it goes, right? That's the way it goes. Will I what?
Have you reviewed the case against him?
No, I haven't. But I just think he's a bad person. Okay, anybody else?
It would have been really funny if, hey, John Bolton's just been indicted. What do you think of that? I would have much rather Donald Trump just been like, yes, yes. Here's NBC's coverage. NBC writing, former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton indicted. He's the third prominent Trump political advisor to face criminal charges in recent weeks following former FBI Director James Comey. I forgot about Letitia James. So we have James Comey 3 weeks ago. That was, by the way, James Comey was indicted right after the aforementioned interview with Congressman Rick Crawford here. Then last week we get Letitia James. Is it Letitia or Letitia? Letitia James, and now John Bolton. So kind of a range there when you think about it. Of course, we were anticipating some of this because you had the raid of John Bolton's house a month or so ago, or maybe more than that, where they were, look, you see it right there. They were confiscating boxes and things and everything else. Here's just the news take. Grand jury indicts former National Security Advisor John Bolton for handling of classified docs. Bolton's home office was raided. And again, CNN reporting that it is likely to do with an America Online account. Here is... So, yeah, this was from earlier today. I want to listen to this. This was from earlier today as CNN was, and I'm focusing on CNN here because it's interesting. It'll just be interesting to see if they, you know how they all looked at James Comey like they've got him on a pedestal. He's like the Boy Scout emperor. He can do no wrong. He's so impartial. He's unbiased. How dare you would ever say James Comey is crooked or corrupt? because in their minds he is some Boy Scout, which of course he's not. He's a narcissist. He's a compulsive liar. And I honestly think James Comey is a sociopath. I mean, certainly has sociopathic tendencies, which I think anybody in those types of jobs has. As a matter of fact, John Kiriakou even said that the CIA looks for people with sociopathic tendencies. They don't want sociopaths. They just want people with sociopathic tendencies. But I think Comey is a full-blown sociopath. It'll be interesting. The reason I'm sticking with CNN is because I'm wondering, are they eventually going to start saying, hey, this is Trump weaponizing the government, right? Weaponizing the government, which is, of course, what was done to him. That's what many of them claimed when James Comey was indicted. This is the weaponization. This is the punishment. But here's Trump going after one of his own former advisors, a guy who was in there to sabotage Trump, a guy who was in there to try to get Trump to go in full-blown war in Syria instead of just launch a few missiles up there out there to appease Lindsey Graham, who still wasn't ever really appeased. Here's John Bolton.
Multiple sources are telling CNN the Justice Department will ask a federal grand jury today to indict President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton.
If you're just joining us, he has been indicted.
This is from earlier. Of the president's self-described political enemies in just 3 weeks. I'm joined here at the table with a terrific group of reporters, including Caitlin Polance, who is bringing us this reporting. Caitlin, what do we know?
Well, Dana, we know now from various sources that the grand jury in Maryland in federal court is expected to be hearing evidence about John Bolton this afternoon. The Justice Department is expected to go in there and ask for an indictment of the former national security advisor to Donald Trump and somebody who is not just well known from the Trump era, but a longtime government official. Mm-hmm. This is a case where
it's been in
the works for years. It's been worked on because Bolton at one point was discovered having an AOL email account, according to the sources I've talked to, where he was writing notes to himself about his time in the Trump White House, and that could include classified documents. We also know from
I'm calling it. And I could be wrong, but I do not think he was writing notes to himself. I take back everything I said about him getting old. I think somebody else had the username and password to the AOL account and could log in and read the drafts, and if he sent the emails, he sent them to himself. But he may not have actually sent the emails. He could have just been doing it in the draft form. I think this was a way. I mean, think about how easy it is. You think you would never get caught, and somebody like John Bolton thinks he's never going to get caught. Somebody like John Bolton thinks if he does get caught, nothing's ever going to happen. Somebody like John Bolton thinks that he was doing in his mind, the right thing for the country. By the country, we mean the intel oligarchy and the deep state that don't want to ever be accountable to anybody, that don't want the blackmail in D.C. to end. They want it to continue because it empowers them to enrich themselves off the backs of average Americans. So I think the whole thing with the AOL account, my question, and I could be wrong about this, who else had access to that email account and who was reading his notes from his time in the Trump White House? John Bolton writing to himself, Trump doesn't want to go to war with Syria first term. Trump knows or suspects that the government spied on him and had Trump Tower wiretapped. Remember when Trump said they spied on my campaign? You're crazy. No, they did not. Now we, of course, know that it's true.
Recent search just 2 months ago that there were many documents, including ones labeled as about weapons of mass destruction, about allied strikes, things that had markings on them that said classified, secret. There were phones, computers, drives, all of that seized from his house.
Was all of that actually labeled classified and secret, or did the FBI go in with cover sheets like they did at Mar-a-Lago? I am assuming, because I didn't see any photos, I'm assuming that it legitimately, if this is the case, this really is such turnabout's fair play. Like, if Bolton actually has documents labeled classified and secret versus the FBI going into Mar-a-Lago with cover sheets, laying them over the files, taking the photo to then send. These are the documents we found. And they basically have 10 top secret nuclear launch codes, pictures of mushroom clouds on them, or what? I know they didn't actually say that, but what a hypocrite. Hypocrite really doesn't even begin to describe
His lawyer has said this could all be very old material from the George W. Bush administration, and nothing inappropriate was being kept by Bolton. But there is still a important possibility here that this is a very serious national security case, and that the Justice Department does continue wanting to enforce cases like these. It might not be all of a political decision.
So, Caitlin.
So the CNN reporter on this morning saying it may not be political. This might be legitimate. I'm kind of stunned by that. Of course, the other talking heads on CNN, we know where they're going to go with this. Trump is a fascist. That's what they're going to say. Here's John Bolton when he first learned of the Mar-a-Lago raid. This is what he said then.
Neither I nor anybody else not involved in the case knows what's in the documents yet. But I do know what kinds of documents were put in front of the president during my time, I'm sure during the entire 4 years of his term. And they did go to absolute, the most important secrets that the United States has, directly affecting national security, directly affecting the lives and safety of our service members and our civilian population. If he has anything like what the indictment alleges, and of course the government will have to prove it, then he has committed very serious crimes.
Very serious.
This is a devastating indictment. I speak here as an alumnus of the Justice Department myself, because not only is it powerful, it's very narrowly tailored. They didn't throw everything up against the wall to see what would stick. This really is a rifle shot, and I think it should be the end of Donald Trump's political career.
Which was the whole point. That was the whole point. So you had a guy like John Bolton. At the time this was going on, you had other Republican hopefuls that were wanting to primary him, thinking that they could beat him. You had people like the former governor of my state, Asa Hutchinson, thinking he was going to run for president and actually get the nomination, saying, well, I mean, if we've got a president under indictment, it's unprecedented. There's never been a nominee for a major party running for office and under indictment. That was that whole narrative. You remember that? We can't have somebody like that. The decency of the office, totally ignoring the fact that everyone bringing these charges against Trump was corrupt. And it really has always been about the intel agencies versus him, which is what Chuck Schumer said. You go after the intel agencies and they've got 6 ways to Sunday of coming back and getting you. And that's what it was. And I will say, as a journalist, the one thing that I forgot to ask Congressman Rick Crawford, and maybe we'll ask him the next time, is does he believe that the raid at Mar-a-Lago was tied to finding his report? That Tulsi Gabbard called him up. Go watch that show. Tulsi Gabbard called him up and said, I'd like to look at your report. I'd like to look at the HPSI report. And he said, absolutely, here it is. And she called him and said, I want to declassify it. And he was relieved. The one question I forgot to ask, which I think many of us, there's other reports out there that already say that this was the reason. They were at Mar-a-Lago looking for the report that showed Barack Obama manufactured the intelligence, ordered the intelligence, had a fake piece of intelligence, creating the whole Russia collusion hoax, piggybacking off of the idea that was incepted by the Hillary Clinton campaign, paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and basically put the country through a total psyop to try to destroy the first term. And they really did. They did, in many ways, destroy that plus COVID destroyed Donald Trump's first term in office in many respects. Refused to let the country just see the results from themselves. They had to lie about everything. Mar-a-Lago raid, they were looking for the evidence. By the way, also the evidence that proved that Vladimir Putin had evidence against Hillary Clinton, that she was taking massive amounts of tranquilizers and had fits of joy and rage simultaneously, which again would probably, if I were a head of state and had that intel, I would assume that a demon is running for president of the United States, because that's exactly what it sounded like. Speaking of heads of state and framing not only Trump for treason, but framing Russia for treason and coup d'etats like the Maidan Revolution sponsored by Victoria Nuland in 2014, here's John Bolton proudly admitting, that it takes a very smart man to plan coups.
I know that I agree with you. To be fair, with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work. And
hang on a second. One doesn't have to be brilliant to plan a coup. You've insulted my life's work. Are you saying that me, the great John Bolton, that I'm not? I am brilliant, as a matter of fact. I disagree. It takes a great deal of intelligence to plan coup d'etat.
I agree with you. To be fair, with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes.
Of course,
a lot
not
of work,
here.
and that's not.
No. Of course, not here. John Bolton. It's only other places. Color revolutions. Revolutions and coups ought not to be talked about in public unless you're way past and you think you got away with it. No, he would never do it here in America. Of course, not here. Would never plan a coup here. Now, in the context of this, they're talking about the insurrection of January 6th, which, of course, that was the left's narrative that, it was a coup. By the way, now that I have gone and read, thanks to Alex Jones reporting, now that I've gone and read the Transition Integrity Project's Podesta plan, as it's called, and I've read it now, and I've seen what they wrote down in paper. They wrote down on paper the crimes they were planning to commit. And I think we're seeing that roll out right now. But if Trump had won clearly in 2020, clearly it had been declared the winner, these guys were going to do the very thing that they then accused Trump of doing. How convenient. That they set up the Fedsurrection, but if Trump had been the clear winner, it would have been totally different. It would have been the same, but anyway, just incredible. But anyway, that's John Bolton. That's the guy that they have indicted. This again is a glance in the right direction. I mean, we need him to keep going. I mean, this is good. I celebrate this. If you'd have told me in 2024 Trump's going to win, I would have believed it after Butler. Pre-Butler, I would have been like, I don't know. I would have been, but Trump's going to win. These are the cabinet officials. It's going to be tough. It's not all great, but Comey's going to be indicted. Bolton's going to be indicted. Letitia James is going to be indicted. And, now you've got Kash Patel saying things like, there's more to come. He's also throwing water on Charlie Kirk conspiracies, which is, you do that at your own peril, buddy, because your story still doesn't make sense, but we'll get to that here in a moment. It's not all great, but it's not all terrible. And we've got to keep going. We've got to push the advantage. Got to have more, because the people who've been operating this color revolution against the American people for the last 10 years have to face justice, or when they get back in power, it will be full-blown communism. I'll have no rights. You'll have no rights. Your family will have no rights. It will be distinctly anti-Christian in its character of everything they want to do. And so, really and truly, as relieved as we all were that there's no Kamala administration, these are much more consequential times, because if we throw our punches figuratively and they fail, then it's going to be really, really bad down the road for normal Americans. And I really believe that. So continue to pray for our country, and continue to pray that criminal actors are exposed, indicted, and get convicted. The conviction is actually the more important part than the indictments and arrests. Speaking of indictments and arrests, there is a report from Joshua Hall on X. This was 20 hours ago, as everybody was kind of buzzing around, hey, John Bolton's going to be indicted. Joshua Hall wrote, former Vice President, now this is an allegation here, I'm just telling you what's on X, so take this with a grain of salt. Former Vice President Mike Pence has been implicated in the DOJ's investigation of former National Security Advisor John Bolton related to Pence's framing of General Flynn to get him fired, his legal possession of classified documents, and his role in January 6th. Bolton recently described Pence as a consistent ally during President Trump's first term. Pence is reportedly also being probed for unlawful leaks, including sensitive national security matters from the Trump White House to the leftist media. Pence and Bolton are said to be facing indictment by a federal grand jury for a litany of federal crimes. They are the very definition of the enemy from within. May justice be swift. Now, again, this is just a report that Mike Pence may be implicated in this. And again, it's on X. And I don't know if it's true or not. But I will say this. If you've been listening to the show up to this point, the question I have, based on the reporting that you have a boomer with an AOL account that thinks he can write draft messages to himself, who else had the password and username to his AOL account? Honest question. Maybe the answer is nobody. Maybe nobody. But could a Mike Pence have had? I mean, depends on, right? Who knows? Maybe Mike Pence or other people had it. Who knows? You never know. You never know. So, anyway, want to switching gears here. This was the topic of the show. We're now half an hour in, but I had to cover that breaking news about John Bolton being indicted. And before we officially move on, real quick, let me see if there's anything new. I just want to bring you the latest. Oh, man. That's pretty funny. People are pulling old headlines of John Bolton like this. This is the latest. Back when Edward Snowden, who I just mentioned, his whole program, X Keyscore, when we were talking about him writing messages to himself with AOL, Luke Radowski says, karma for John Bolton out of this headline. Former U.S. envoy says Snowden should be hanged as a traitor. Do you remember this? Do you remember Edward Snowden? So this is the side. This guy is very much, John Bolton has always been on the side of the intelligence oligarchy that doesn't have to answer to anyone, let alone the President of the United States. That's why this is a huge deal. And it's been a long time coming. A very long time coming. So in other news, the entire topic of this program, as you saw from the thumbnail if you're watching on YouTube at a later date, is supposed to be this news about the J6 committee. What we discovered from the J6 committee was that they were so wrapped up in squashing populism. That's what this is truly about. This is about communist show trials, and everything they did to the J6ers, they wanted to do to as many people as they possibly could. They wanted to make people pay for trying to stand up and redress their government for grievances for what they perceived correctly to be a stolen election in 2020. And they made the J6ers pay. People like a friend of mine, Derek Evans, comes to mind, and others. And in order to do that, they pulled out all the stops to set up, I think, future show trials. So we have this story here from John Solomon. Mike Benz responds by saying they secretly collected 30 million lines of phone data to create a dragnet of Trump. So earlier I think I said 30 million Americans, 30 million lines of phone data. I think it was all based on the attendees. Revolver has a story here. Let's see if I can make this a little bit more viewable for you guys. Yeah, maybe you may not be able to see it, but maybe you can still see the full headline. So, bombshell. Adam Kinzinger, huge never-Trumper, unmasked in J6 warrantless dragnet plot against MAGA. So, Revolver News writes, now that the curtain's getting pulled back more and more on the January 6th setup, and yes, the infamous pipe bomb hoax that aged about as well as a gas station sushi, the bombshells are coming in fast and furious style. Most of us already knew J6 was less of an insurrection and more of a Fed surrection, and that the pipe bomb story was a political fairy tale. So while a lot of people are done with the bombshells and ready for indictments, it's still worth connecting the dots. He says because, let's face it, if there's one person who wants justice more than anyone, it's President Trump, the man they used J6 to target in the first place. I hope that's a true statement. I hope. You would think the guy got shot in the ear. You would hope it would be him the most. I got a feeling there's people in America that want it way more than President Trump. I'm just telling you. But the piece goes on. So on that note, journalist John Solomon just dropped another bombshell that exposes the puppet masters behind the chaos. Turns out, when everyday Americans showed up at January 6th rally to peacefully stand up against what they believed to be a shady 2020 election, they were caught up in secret, warrantless congressional dragnets. And one of the key players in this latest revelation is none other than never-Trumper Adam Kinzinger, the poster boy for Trump derangement syndrome, Republicans, and one of the most sketchy members of the sham J6 committee. MAGA might be interested to know that Congress collected 30 million lines of their phone data that day, which John Solomon says anybody concerned with Congress secretly collected 30 million lines of phone data to map who might be a MAGA supporter for contacting the Trump White House and then tried to backdoor it to the FBI. Perhaps time for a refresher course on the Fourth Amendment. They didn't care. They didn't think they would be caught. They did it. They thought, look, this was a, hey, we're going for the king and we better not miss. And they thought they had him. After J6, after the 274 FBI agents that were in the crowd that we know of that day, and by the way, just because of that 274 FBI agents that we now know were in the crowd that day in plain clothes, just because some of them were complainers and whistleblowers and didn't want to be there, according to reports, do you know how many agents you would need to incite a riot? Not a lot. Out of 274? Now, don't assume that the 274 that were there were all there and like, oh, I can't believe we're being asked to be here. This seems political. No. not at all. I suspect many of them were there with specific instructions. But yeah, the Fourth Amendment. Like, they don't care about that. They don't care about your rights. This was about squashing populism for good. The whole J6 thing. It was the whole J6 Fedsurrection, the false flag. It was all about killing populism and preventing Donald Trump from ever being able to run for office again. That's what this is about. And now that we know, there are reports, and I've referenced these reports before, and I don't feel like anyone is talking about them as much as I am. This was several weeks ago, but I watched the Alex Jones show where he had just gotten off the phone with Ed Martin, okay, and he was detailing everything he talked about with Ed Martin, and one of the things he said was that Ed Martin had Jack Smith's emails, and that they had planned to do these giant trials where they were going to try people in absentia, hundreds at a time, and convict them. And I think this goes along with all of that. Identifying Trump supporters who are willing to take off work and go to Washington, D.C., you're a national security threat. Whether we got you entering an unauthorized space or not, or whether we got you on this bogus interrupting an official proceeding, which was an Enron statute to fight white-collar crime and keep people from shredding documents to keep them from the Securities and Exchange Commission, whether you get them on that or whether you get them on nothing, because there were people that were there that didn't get targeted because they didn't do the thing that the feds said other people did. So this was about a list, man. This was about making a list, an enemies list, and going after people once they had solidified their power, and getting Kamala in there, which would have been another puppet. But after the geriatric auto pen Biden administration, if they could have gotten in power again and maintained their power, they would have known, okay, we're here forever, gloves off, and now we go after people. It would have been so much worse than just, if you think going after grandmas who are praying outside of abortion clinics was bad, it was nothing compared to what they had planned. And that is why the deep state, the intel oligarchy, must be winnowed. They must be dismantled and destroyed, and those that committed crimes based on the lawful authority that our side has right now have to go to jail for it. They have to. And if they don't, and if the people that Trump is surrounding himself again come back to us with more excuses, they're only condemning average American families to communism at this point. And I fully believe that. And I don't think there's anybody in this audience that doubts me. I'm not trying to be sensational, but if anything, if COVID taught us anything, it's that whatever the line is that you think that the government is not going to cross, they're going to cross it. And the minute you think, well, the government would never do that. There'd be too many people that would be upset. Somewhere, there's somebody that's got a bright idea that's like, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. So, something to think about. You can ask Rob. I know Rob, he's not here today. But he hears me say this like every show. Like, if they don't get these criminals behind bars, from the highest up to the common criminal, but specifically the higher ups, they are condemning American families to full on mask off communism. Those are the stakes. All right, so John Fetterman went on News Nation at the Kennedy Center. Democrats apparently are mad at him for saying things like this.
Credit to my family. I grew up in a conservative part of Pennsylvania, and I grew up and I know and I love people that voted for President Trump. But they are not fascists. They're not Nazis. They're not trying to destroy the Constitution and those things. And that's part of another thing. I refuse to call people Nazis or fascists, or I would never compare anybody to Hitler and those things. And now that kinds of extreme rhetoric is going to continue. We're going to be more likely in resulting in extreme kind of outcomes and political violence and doing all these kinds of things like Charlie Kirk. For me, all I could say is like, let people grieve. Give people the space. I'm not going to use that terrible thing and that Pasek assassination to make my argument and try to put out my views. It's like, my God, he's a father that had his neck blown out by a bullet. And now people have forgotten. President Trump in my state, was shot in the head. And if that could you imagine where our nation would be if he was hit in the same way with Kirk? We really got to turn the temperature down. And we can agree to disagree on these kinds of things. But right now, shutting down the government.
So I'm sure, I'm sure Democrats, they don't want to turn down the rhetoric, a lot of them. Here's a Democrat that does. Now you can say, well, I suspect. Gosh, he saw Pennsylvania go for Trump. He saw that. If this guy wants to have an electoral future, he's got to have, at a bare minimum, this stance. Bare minimum to even have a chance. Fetterman's got to have this stance where I don't think Trump supporters in Pennsylvania are fascists. So yeah, it's, political calculation, absolutely. And at the same time, he's absolutely right. Will the Democrat base listen to him? No, they will not. No, they will not. You've got Politico reporting this story about the college Republicans and their text message thread, where they said these things that everyone wants to be offended of. And, many of them, if you read the context, I think, they were joking. And it's, whatever. It is what it is. But to compare that to what Jay Jones said, clearly not joking, about murdering somebody's family over politics, yet it's the perfect timing, right? They don't want to denounce members of their own party who are actually running as. Can you imagine if you're living in Virginia and Jay Jones gets elected as the Attorney General, and you think, my goodness, this guy is supposed to enforce the law, and he thinks that dead children of a political opponent is a good thing because they might change their views on policy? It's like something Darth Vader would say. He also said, he also talked about the Democrat being an extremist party. Listen.
If you're thinking about winning the election, and so now that's all going to come down to 7 or 8 states. And that's really that matters. And I would like to remind everybody, because we all know that Trump ran the table, all of those kinds of states. And now you can't ever forget, these are the states that are going to determine who's going to be the next administration. And now a lot of the things, the extremism that people turn their back in 24, and that's how we kind of came up short. I campaigned for thousands and thousands of miles across Pennsylvania for Vice President Harris. And it was going to be incredibly difficult. You could just feel the energy there. And people really have connected there at a very fundamental level. And that's what I tried to explain to my party. And I'm trying to explain to the party right now. It's like, this is why we lost. And this is where we need to be to continue to win for these things. And there are parts of extreme things emerging clearly on those things. And that's why I refuse to follow that, even if that is going to cost me support in parts of the base.
Well, yeah, in parts of the base, but I mean, in order to win, this guy's going to have independence in Pennsylvania, and so at a bare minimum, again, this has got to be his political position. I want to bring in AOC here. Hang on 1 second. Where did she go? Because I think that's a good juxtaposition. Oh, here it is. So here's a good juxtaposition with what Fetterman just said about fighting extremism, and what AOC said about masculinity and men. And you just tell me, this is the leader of the party.
And it is clear to communicate that as an individual. Now, to the question earlier as well, when they talk about Republicans and their success online, they have been successful because they have also been very clear, especially digitally, about what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, digitally, you mean online. You just said online, and now you're saying digitally. You're saying the same thing. We know, online, social media, that's digital.
That women are inferior, they do not deserve equal rights, that they believe that LGBTQ Americans are subhuman, that they believe and are circulating disgusting racial and white supremacist messaging that they are able to get away with digitally and online. And they are able to
digitally and online
and target and exploit a generation of young boys, in particular, away from healthy masculinity and into an insecure masculinity that requires the domination of others.
No. She requires men to not be men. She requires, and her party requires, that men become feminists. And this is actually this is really discombobulated, and maybe so is my analysis. I get it, but anyway, I'm going to let her keep going here.
Who are poorer, browner, darker, or a different gender than them. And that is why they are resonating online of others who are poorer, browner, darker, or a different gender than them.
Yeah, that was right after also the masculinity comments. It was really speaking to this feminist here in the audience. Like, yeah, that's right. They need a softer version of masculinity, not this online right-wing masculinity. We don't want anything to do with that. So you think about the rhetoric here between Fetterman and between, like, we need to cool it down. And then she goes out there and she says, they're white. They're all white supremacists, and they think LGBTQ people are subhuman. That's not true. We don't think they're subhuman. We think they're wrong. And the pushback against the LGBTQRSTLNE, would you like to buy a vowel, enclave, results from mass media for the last 10 years telling us that this is the only thing we should care about. You know, there's a narrative out there that the right is obsessed with trans people. No, the response that seems like an obsession is the resistance to everyone telling us that the LGBT is the new incarnation of the civil rights movement of the 60s. And it's everywhere. And you get people arrested for peeling out on a rainbow crosswalk. You get your kids inundated with Tuck-It swimsuits in Target. It's not that we think they're subhuman. The reaction to this cultural takeover is totally expected and is totally normal, because thank the Lord there are enough people in America that know the difference between normal and crazy.
And that is why they are resonating online, because they are appealing to the most basest and worst parts of human nature to divide us. And why to divide us? So that the same people who own those platforms, people like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Zuckerberg,
Ooh, he used to be in on with the good guys.
That these people can
with the bad
continue
guys.
to get away with highway robbery in tax cuts, and in order to fleece all of our pockets, cut our health care, keep our wages low, so that we remain fighting amongst ourselves while they make themselves
nodding
richer.
Female heads, yes.
And so, in
Yes.
order for us to fight back against that, we must be clear about what we believe, have strong beliefs, and also be completely unwilling to bow to that kind of division and stand in solidarity with one another, especially when it is someone whose culture is different from ours or whose background we may not entirely understand, but that we honor, love, and see as our fellow American.
But not white culture. You can't honor and respect that because it doesn't exist. And to suggest that it does would mean that you are a racist. No, what's funny is I can sit here and I can make fun of this. But that is the leader of the Democrat Party, and that message, even though it was repetitive, like we need to have strong beliefs and we need to believe in our beliefs, or whatever it is she said in the end. That is the language. Like she is talking in an incoherent way, in a half incoherent way, but she's passionate about it, and she's speaking slowly, and she's trying, and that type of thing with the left and the younger generation that is still leftist. Obviously, I know we got a younger generation that's more right wing than ever. There's still a lot of left wing crazy young people out there. That message is like milk to these people. Like it's like gold. They eat that up. I'm just telling you what I think. Like that's a message that's going to resonate with a lot of people. They love the platitudes. The platitudes are what get them motivated, for sure. All right, backing up here for a second. Hang on, I got my show all out of order here because so the Supreme Court, the redistricting, that's going to set them off for sure. Let's see, how much time do I have left? I don't have a lot of time. Kash Patel. Yeah, let's do these two stories here. First off, we'll do this one. You guys remember Big Balls? How could you forget? Kendra Briggs, a Biden-appointed judge, gives no jail time to teens responsible for brutally attacking Doge employee Big Balls, who, by the way, because he took that beating and he stood up for his date, it resulted in the National Guard being deployed to Washington, D.C. Like anybody out there, where you're left or right in Washington, D.C., if you're enjoying your safer streets, you need to thank Big Balls for taking a beating. Because if he didn't take that whooping, the National Guard might not have been deployed to D.C. when it was. So this is, can you believe this? No jail time for these people that committed this assault. I mean, look at this photo. Okay, the guy was clearly roughed up. Kendra Briggs, so the teens, they were teenagers, and they were instead sentenced to probation. Judge Briggs stated that her goal is to rehabilitate, not to punish. So send them back on the street so that we can eventually get another Irina Zaruska. Another Irina Zaruska is in the making because they don't want to put these teenagers in jail who committed the crimes that they did against big balls. I can't believe I'm even saying that phrase. As like a serious thing and not a joke. Megan Basham says this in response to this news. The author from Shepherds for Sale. Go buy the book Shepherds for Sale if you haven't. If you're a Christian and you haven't read the book Shepherds for Sale, go get it today. It will enlighten you about how there's been an effort to carve out a safe space for Marxists within the evangelical church and circles. She says what these light sentences from left-wing judges are signaling is that it's open season on conservatives or anyone who wants to reform our government. They tried to assassinate Trump. They did assassinate Charlie. They continue to endorse a candidate who wished not for just the deaths of his political opponents, but also their children. And they're making it clear that if you inflict violence on conservatives, you will not be punished for it. For the first time since I started paying attention to politics as a teen, they are facing a political opponent who is actually rolling back the tide of left-wing advances, not just throwing a few speed bumps in its way. And they are showing that they will do anything to stop that. Yeah, and then here we have this. This is a billboard. There are billboards going up all over America supporting Charlie Kirk, wanting to get behind his movement. And this was one that was vandalized. It was paid for by True Metal Supply in North Carolina. The original letters read, "The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church." And then had a memorial, Charlie Kirk, 1993 to 2025. And somebody vandalized it, tore his face off. It says, "Smash fascism, stand up, fight back." They're openly calling for more violence. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's public assassination, they still want more and more violence. And lastly, we're going to leave you with this. Well, that's the Trump-Russia thing. I've got so many stories today. We're going to give you a snapshot of the communist state of Maine, where parents there still have some common sense. To make their point, we have women who decided to change their clothes in front of the school board and to make a point that this is inappropriate and it shouldn't happen, and yet they'll let it happen in the name of transgender rights. Watch.
Had an opportunity tonight to be heroes. Yes, you guys. You guys became heroes. It's not about to show you guys how uncomfortable it is to be heroes.
Point of order.
Point of order. We've asked that we use.
Oh, so wait. They're covered. You feel uncomfortable? Because that's what these young girls feel like when a boy walks into the locker room and starts unchanging in front of them. Yeah, you feel uncomfortable, right? Feel uncomfortable, huh? That's what these young girls feel like every time a young boy changes in front of them. You can look at me like that all you want. That's exactly how they feel. And you, Miss Muffy, oh, well, I don't know if I stand with girls or if I stand with my, with the... So you don't care how young girls feel? You don't care about the safety of young kids? What about what happened in Virginia with that boy that raped a young girl in a bathroom, then got sent to another school and did it again? What are we going to do when that happens here? How are you going to look that girl in the face and say, "Sorry, I didn't protect you"? This is Maine's capital. We should be setting an example for the rest of the state. You know what example you guys are setting? That we do not care about the young girls in this state. You guys care about politics.
You know, it does make the point. You've heard, this is another iteration of reading the pornographic pedophile books from the library at city council and school board meetings, and then they don't want to hear the graphic details, and so they'll try to silence them. You can't say, there's like, wait a second, but I can say this, but we can give it to our kids, but I can't read it in a public forum, and they don't get it. The left refuse it. They're just liars, man. I mean, there's a point where you try to convince somebody, but then there's a point where, no, they are just liars. And all they care about is winning. They don't care about fairness. They don't really care about equality. So it's the same thing where you saw the two women, they dressed down, and it wasn't, it was underwear, and they're making them uncomfortable. They try to say point of order. We got people taking their clothes. Oh, wow, you don't like this? Well, why don't you like it? Because men and women shouldn't be in bathrooms and locker rooms together. There's a reason we have these separate spaces. So here we are. Hey, tomorrow on the program, I'm going to be talking with Colonel Conrad Reynolds. There has been a story that is now, it's got national outrage. Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, Ann Vandersteel, all of them are outraged at an indictment that came out of Arkansas against Conrad Reynolds, who's been a champion for voter integrity, election integrity, and paper ballots. Conrad Reynolds, tomorrow, Friday, we're doing a show, 4 p.m. Central. Conrad Reynolds will be in seat number 3 tomorrow. We're going to be talking with him about everything that led up to this event, because there's a lot of stuff that's been going on that I don't even really know about that I'm going to be educated on, and I am excited to host Colonel Conrad Reynolds tomorrow on the program. You don't want to miss it. That is all the time that we have for this edition of the Paul Harrell program. God bless everybody out there watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.